Now I'm going to show you how to make a really clean and crisp filter coffee. And I'm going to use automatic filter brewer at the end of the video. But in the first we're going to start with a V60. They're basically the same thing. You have a filter holder, a paper filter, and some hot water and coffee. So the most important ingredient that you need to think about is obviously the coffee. You cannot make good coffee without having good ingredients. So make sure you have a nice tasting coffee. Go to your coffee shop and ask them what's the best coffee you have today. So let me start with the coffee. I recommend using 65 grams per liter of water. And I'm gonna brew 500 grams, which means half a liter. So then we need 32.5 grams of coffee. Now I'm gonna grind it. And the problem with making filter coffee is that the more you make, the coarser you have to grind. And the less you make, the finer you have to grind. So you need to have a grinder that's adjustable. And it's a little difficult to communicate what's perfect for the amount you're going to brew. So you need a timer to time your brews, and you need your palate to taste your brews. So normally, if the coffee tastes astringent and bitter, you need to grind coarser. And if it tastes watery and weak, you need to grind finer. And always use the same dose. So let's grind. Okay, so now I'm gonna wash the filter. And I always use white paper filter. The brown ones tends to taste a little papery. So the white ones taste a little bit less, but we still need to rinse it with water. And you can rinse it with cold water if you want. But especially when I'm brewing with a glass filter holder, I like to rinse it with hot water. So you heat up the filter holder. I'm just gonna throw this water out. Now I'm gonna put the coffee in. So 32 grams, and we're gonna brew with 500 grams of water. Now I'm gonna shake the filter a little bit just to level out the coffee bed, and then tear the scale so it reads 0. Take your water kettle. It's okay if it's boiling water. You will lose a lot of temperature when you pour, so don't worry about that. Start the timer, and then we pour on about 60 grams of water. It's okay if it's a little bit less or a little bit more, don't worry about it. And now I'd like to stir while the coffee is blooming, just to make sure everything is wet. And blooming is basically the coffee releasing CO2 gas, and so that the grounds can get saturated with the water. So you just want to make sure all the grounds are equally wet before you start brewing. 30 seconds into the brew now, and we're going to start pouring more water. So I'm going to pour up until 200 grams. And it's okay if it's 190 or 205, you know, you don't have to be that accurate. Just make sure all the grounds are joining the pool party, so they're all sort of being extracted by the water. It's about a minute into the brew now. I'm gonna pour some more. And just continue like this in circular motions until you reach 500 grams of water. Just make sure you don't pour on the filter, on the sides, because you're gonna have bypass. That means the water will just pass through the filter and go straight in. And that will give you a very watery coffee. So try to sort of center the pouring a little bit more in the filter. Now the total brew time for half a liter should be around 2 minutes to 2 minutes 30 seconds pouring time. And then you're gonna have an extra minute or so while the water is going through the coffee. If it's taking too long, you might end up with a very bitter brew, and over-extracted coffee is always kind of astringent and bitter. So don't compensate by adding less coffee or something. Stick to the same dose, but grind the coffee a little bit coarser. Then you'll open up the coffee, you won't get that bitterness. If you feel that it's getting too thin again or too sour, that means you're under-extracting the coffee. That means the grounds are too coarse. So then you need to adjust finer. So if you use the time and your taste buds a little bit, you're gonna end up with a very nice brew at the end. Just stick to the same dose, 65 grams per liter. So for half a liter, around 2 minutes, 2 minutes 30 seconds pouring time, total brewing time 3 minutes to 3 minutes 30 seconds. And with the liter it should be around 4 minutes pouring time, total brewing time 5 minutes, something like that. Now we're just gonna wait for the water to pour through, and then we're gonna stir the coffee and serve it. Alright, so it's about 3 minutes 15 seconds into the brew now, and it's just about to finish. So I'm gonna take another cup, shake off the water from the filter, and then place it here. You can just throw it out straight away if you want, or compost it. I prefer to compost if you can. And now it's very important to stir the coffee, because the layer on the top is thinner than the layer in the bottom. So if you serve it straight away, you're gonna get a thin cup of coffee and then a strong cup of coffee. So just stir it to make it equal. And I'm going to pour into the cup, but I'm going to let it cool down a little bit, because good coffee always tastes a lot better when it's cooled down a little bit. And while we wait for that, I'm going to show you how to brew it on a filter brewer. So we're going to use the same methods, meaning we have 32.5 grams of coffee. I've washed the filter, I have half a liter of water. All you need to do is throw the coffee in, push the button, give it a little stir when the water hits the coffee, and then you wait until it's finished. Let's start the timer. Coffee is finished. You don't really need to use a timer when you brew coffee, but it's a really nice indicator of if you're grinding too fine or too coarse. Now this took just the same amount of time as with the V60, but it was a little bit easier to make the coffee. I'm going to turn off the hot plate. Don't leave the coffee on a hot plate. It makes the coffee taste terrible. Stir a little bit, then serve it. But like with the other coffee, wait a couple of minutes before you start enjoying it, because it's going to taste a little bit more bitter in the beginning and more fruity and sweet when it cools down a little bit. So like with this one. That's really good. So clean and delicious. Now watch me take this swing.